You wake up in a world where the air hurts your face. Not chilly, not uncomfortable, painful. Every breath feels sharp, like the sky has turned into stone, and your lungs have to carve through it. The ground beneath you is frozen hard. The wind moves across the open land with no mercy, pulling heat out of your skin, faster than your body can replace it. And somewhere beyond the dark, something larger than you is also hungry. This is the Ice Age. But here is the strange part. Your ancestors survived it. They did not have central heating. They did not have grocery stores. They did not have waterproof jackets, steel knives, weather apps, medicine cabinets, or houses with sealed windows. They were small, soft-bodied primates on a cold planet filled with mammoths, cave lions, wolves, and long winters. So how did they live? The answer is not one trick. It was not just fire. It was not just caves. It was not just fur. It was a whole survival system built from bodies, tools, memory cooperation, and a brain that could imagine tomorrow before tomorrow arrived. To understand this, you have to step into the cold properly. When people say the Ice Age, they often imagine one giant frozen world. But the Ice Age was not a single day of snow. It was a long, unstable period when glaciers expanded, climates shifted, sea levels dropped, and entire landscapes changed shape. The last major cold peak is called the last glacial maximum. That means the time when ice sheets were at or near their greatest extent during the last glacial period. In plain English, it was one of the coldest chapters your species had to face. Around 26,000 to 19,000 years ago, huge ice sheets covered much of northern Europe and North America. Sea levels were far lower because so much water was locked inside ice. Grasslands stretched across places that are forests or cities today. The world was drier, windier, and harsher in many regions. But humans were not standing naked in the snow hoping for luck. By then, Homo sapiens were already masters of adaptation. They had fire. They had tailored clothing. They had shelters. They had hunting strategies. They had social networks. They had stories. And most importantly, they had culture. Culture is not just art or music. Culture is information that survives outside one body. It is what your grandmother knows about where the animals move. It is what your uncle knows about which wood burns longest. It is what your group remembers about the valley where storms are less deadly. In the Ice Age, culture was not decoration. Culture was life support. Start with the most obvious enemy, cold. Your body is warm-blooded, which means it must keep its inner temperature within a narrow range. Too hot, and your cells begin to fail. Too cold, and your muscles slow. Your thinking weakens. Your heart becomes unstable, and eventually you die. A modern human body can survive a brief blast of cold, but the Ice Age was not brief. It was season after season, night after night, wind after wind. So your ancestors had to protect heat the way modern people protect money. They could not waste it. One of the biggest breakthroughs was clothing. Not just animal skins thrown over the shoulder, but increasingly fitted clothing that trapped warm air close to the body. Archaeologist Ian Gilligan has argued that the development of complex clothing was one of the great human responses to cold environments. Simple clothing is like a loose cloak. Complex clothing is closer to a fitted coat, leggings, boots, or layered coverings that actually seal warmth around the body. That difference matters. A loose hide can block wind for a moment, but fitted clothing lets you move, hunt, carry children, gather fuel, and sleep without losing heat from every opening. The evidence is indirect because clothing rots away. Fur, leather, sinew, and plant fibers do not survive easily for tens of thousands of years, but the tools survive. Bone awls, scrapers, eyed needles. An awl is a pointed tool used to pierce holes. A scraper can clean and soften hides. An eyed needle is a needle with a tiny hole for thread, often made of bone or ivory. When archaeologists find these tools, they are not just finding sewing equipment. They are finding survival technology. Imagine your hands in that world. You are scraping fat from an animal hide with a stone tool. Your fingers are stiff from cold. Someone beside you is using a bone awl to punch holes. Another person twists sinew into thread. The hide becomes a covering, then a tighter covering, then something shaped to a body. A sleeve, a hood, a wrap for a child. It does not look like fashion yet. It looks like staying alive. But clothing alone was not enough. You also needed fire. Fire was heat, yes. But that is only the beginning. Fire dried wet clothing. Fire hardened wooden spear tips. Fire made food safer and easier to digest. Fire pushed back darkness. Fire discouraged some predators. Fire created a center where people could gather and communicate. In a frozen landscape, a fire was not just a tool. It was a small artificial sun. Think about what that means at night. The temperature drops. The wind rises. The dark expands beyond the circle of light. Inside that circle, people repair tools, share food, comfort children, and watch the edge of the world. Outside the circle, the Ice Age continues. Polly Wiesner, an anthropologist who studied firelight conversations among Jew/Huansi hunter-gatherers, found that nighttime talk around fires often shifted away from practical daytime concerns and toward stories, social bonds, jokes, memories, and imagined worlds. Her work does not mean Ice Age people talked in exactly the same way, but it gives us a living clue about what fire can do to human social life. Fire did not only warm bodies, it warmed the group. And in the Ice Age, the group was part of your shelter. Modern people often think shelter means walls. But for your ancestors, shelter could mean many things. A cave, a rock overhang, a windbreak made of branches, a hut framed with bone or wood, a pit in the ground, a snowbank used as protection from wind, or simply a sleeping cluster of bodies arranged around heat. Caves were useful, but they were not magical hotels. Many caves were damp, dark, dangerous, and already used by animals. Some were too deep. Some were too smoky if fire was used carelessly. Some were not close to food. So humans used caves when they made sense, but they also built. At sites like Dolní Věstonice and Pavlov, in what is now the Czech Republic, archaeologists have found evidence of rich Ice Age camps connected with mammoth hunting bone, ivory hearths, tools, ornaments, and organized living spaces. Dolní Věstonice is famous for its mammoth bone remains and some of the earliest known fired clay figurines. The point is not that every Ice Age group lived in mammoth bone huts. They did not. The point is that humans were not just hiding from nature. They were rearranging it. A mammoth bone is not just a bone if your brain can turn it into architecture. A hide is not just skin if your hands can turn it into a wall. A fire pit is not just ash if your group can build a night around it. That is the human trick. You take the world apart and rebuild tiny pieces of it around your body. But surviving the Ice Age was not only about warmth, it was also about food. Cold landscapes can be brutally generous and brutally empty. Large animals like mammoths, reindeer horses, bison, and musk oxen offered enormous calories. But they were dangerous, mobile, seasonal, and never guaranteed. A successful hunt could feed many people. A failed hunt could mean days of hunger. So Ice Age humans had to understand animal behavior with incredible precision. Where do herds move? When do they cross rivers? Which animals are weak? Where does wind carry your scent? How do you surround prey without getting trampled? How do you butcher quickly before scavengers arrive? How do you carry meat back before it freezes solid or is stolen? This was not random chasing. This was knowledge. Archaeological sites across Ice Age Europe show stone points, blades, scrapers, cut-marked bones, hearths, and organized camps. These are the traces of planning. A blade is not just a sharp rock. It is stored energy from a mind that prepared before hunger arrived. And that preparation may have mattered more than strength. You could be brave and still freeze. You could be strong and still starve. You could be fast and still lose the herd. But if your group remembered where reindeer passed last year, if someone knew how to repair a broken point, if elders remembered a sheltered valley, if children learned which tracks meant danger, your odds changed. This is why older people may have been so valuable. Anthropologist Rachel Kaspari has argued that the number of older adults increased in the Upper Paleolithic, and that this may have transformed human societies. Upper Paleolithic means the later part of the Old Stone Age, when modern humans produced increasingly complex tools, art ornaments, and long-distance social connections. Older adults carried memory. They knew past winters. They had seen injuries. They remembered famine and recovery. In an Ice Age world, an elder was not just someone who no longer hunted as fast. An elder was a library with a heartbeat. Now imagine one winter day. You wake before sunrise. The air inside the shelter is cold, but not as cold as outside. You can smell smoke in your hair, hide, and skin. A child is pressed against an adult for warmth. Someone is already awake, feeding the fire carefully because fuel is precious. Fuel matters. That is another thing modern people forget. Fire requires work. You need wood, bone, dried dung, or other burnable material depending on the landscape. In treeless cold steppe environments, fuel could be limited. You cannot just make a giant fire every night forever. You have to gather, carry, store, and ration it. So the group moves with fuel in mind. Shelter with fuel in mind. Food with fuel in mind. Survival is not one decision. It is a chain of decisions. Outside, the snow is crusted hard. The sky is pale. Tracks cross the ground. Some are old. Some are fresh. Your group reads the surface like a book. A broken crust here. A hoof mark there. A smear of blood from an animal injured days ago. A wolf track too close. This is not scenery. This is information. You follow, not alone. Alone is how you disappear. Someone carries a spear. Someone carries stone tools. Someone knows the route. Someone stays back with children. Someone watches the weather. Someone remembers where the last hunt failed. The Ice Age did not reward individual heroes the way movies do. It rewarded coordinated groups. Even the strongest hunter needed toolmakers, hide workers, fire keepers, trackers, child carers, food sharers, and people who could calm fear before fear broke the group apart. That is the part modern survival fantasies often miss. The Ice Age was not won by one muscular man with a spear. It was survived by communities, and those communities were connected. We sometimes imagine prehistoric groups as isolated bands alone in the frozen wilderness. But archaeological evidence shows long-distance movement and exchange. Stone shells, ornaments, and artistic styles sometimes appear far from their source. That means people moved, met, copied, traded, married, learned, and carried ideas across landscapes. In a dangerous climate, social connection is insurance. If your local herd route fails, someone far away may know another. If your group becomes too small, marriage partners matter. If a tool design works better, it spreads. If a story preserves a warning, it travels. Information moves faster than genes, and in the Ice Age, information could be warmer than fur. Now look at another survival problem: migration. Humans did not simply sit still while glaciers grew. They shifted ranges, followed animals, found refuges, and sometimes entered entirely new worlds. Refugia are places where life survives during harsh climate periods because conditions are less extreme. In plain English, they are survival pockets. During cold peaks, some regions became too harsh or less populated. Other regions became crucial shelters. Southern Europe, parts of Western Asia, and other areas offered routes, resources, and pockets of survivable climate. Human history in the Ice Age is partly a story of movement toward possibility. One of the most powerful examples of Ice Age movement comes from White Sands in New Mexico. Human footprints there have been dated by multiple studies to roughly 23,000 to 21,000 years ago, placing people in North America during the last Ice Age. The exact story of how and when people moved through the Americas is still debated, but the footprints themselves are haunting. They are not tools, they are not bones, they are steps. Someone walked there, a child, an adult, maybe people crossing wet ground near an ancient lake, maybe carrying something, maybe following others. Footprints are emotional evidence because they collapse time. For a moment, the Ice Age stops being a chart and becomes a person putting one foot in front of the other. And that may be the deepest answer to the question. How did ancient humans survive the Ice Age? Step by step, but never only one step alone. They survived because they could plan beyond the present. They could take an animal and turn it into food, clothing, tools, shelter, glue, ornament, and story. They could take a dangerous night and build a circle of fire and bodies. They could take memory from one generation and place it inside the next. They survived because they were not specialized like polar bears. They did not have fur thick enough for the cold. They did not have claws like predators. They did not have the strength of mammoths. They were vulnerable, but they were flexible. Flexibility is the human superpower. A mammoth is powerful in one way. A cave lion is powerful in one way. A human group is powerful in many small ways at once. You can change the shape of stone. You can stitch skin into clothing. You can carry fire. You can store knowledge in language. You can teach a child something that happened before the child was born. You can imagine danger before danger arrives. That is why the Ice Age did not kill ancient humans. It forced them to become more human. But there is a twist. The Ice Age was not only something humans survived. It may have shaped the modern mind you still carry. Your love of warm rooms, soft blankets, hot food, shared meals. Firelight stories at night and staying close to people you trust may not be random preferences. They may be echoes of an older world where warmth and belonging were the same survival signal. When you sit near a heater, you are using a modern sun. When you wear a coat, you are wearing the descendant of stitched hides. When you gather with family around food, you are repeating an ancient pattern. When a dark winter evening makes you want warmth, voices, and light your body, maybe remembering a problem older than civilization. The modern world often treats comfort as luxury. But for most of human history, comfort was not luxury. Comfort was survival working correctly. Warmth meant you might live through the night. A group meant someone might hear danger before you did. A fire meant the dark had a boundary. A story meant fear could be shared instead of carried alone. So when you imagine the Ice Age, do not only imagine frozen death. Imagine intelligence under pressure. Imagine children wrapped in hides. Imagine smoke rising against a brutal sky. Imagine footprints crossing wet ground that would one day become desert. Imagine a small group of humans surrounded by cold predators, hunger, and darkness. And then imagine them doing the impossible. They make a coat. They make a fire. They make a shelter. They make a plan. They make each other brave enough to sleep. You wake up in a world where the air hurts your face. But this time, you are not just cold. You are standing inside the reason your species survived.